ジャギ様から盗み取った北斗神拳、とくと味合わせてやるわ。
Hi, welcome to a new video. There is one little thing I gotta let you know, and that one thing is thank you. Really appreciate you all watching these videos, guys. It's insane how much support I've been getting lately, and you could help me out even more by clicking the subscribe button down there. It's really easy, and only about 17% of you guys that watch my videos are subscribed, so it helps me out tremendously, as well as clicking the like button on this video, and might as well click the notification bell if you want to see my future videos. Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome to a new video. My name is Midway, and today we're looking at a rating guide focused on gameplay alone for Holy Paladins in Season 4 of Shadowlands. So, I've been getting some questions about what is it that I'm doing to do a lot of healing, seeing that a Holy Paladin is able to compete with some other of the big HPS classes like Resto Druids and Holy Priests and Mistweavers and whatnot. So, I'm here to let you guys know a little bit of what I do. It's not like I'm doing anything crazy. I'm just trying to put in some sort of context that what I might be doing, it's not that different from what you're doing, and the reality is it's really all just about how smooth you can do the overall rotation. So let's get into it. Right, so let's go through the basics first. We are running with MARAADS as our legendary, and it's crafted on the chest. Now the way you play with MARAADS is that after casting any Light of Dawn, or consuming any of the charges of Vanquisher's Hammer, that is using a Word of Glory after having casted a Vanquisher's Hammer, then you will have to use a Light of the Martyr to then consume the buff you got from that Light of Dawn. So you want to have some way of tracking this buff. I personally have a weak aura in the middle of my screen, so after every Light of Dawn, I'm going to be using a Light of the Martyr onto the target that I see that has the lowest HP, just to try and minimize the overhealing. Now I am beaconing my tanks. It's gonna be always both the tanks, so you should try to avoid using any healing onto those tanks. If you do so, you are losing efficiency of your beacons, because any healing done onto a beacon target is not going to be replicated onto that same beacon. So you want to always try and use any sort of healing that includes these big fat Lights of the Martyr onto any other targets. Now whenever you have a 2-set proc, then you will have a double Light of Dawn happening after you cast your next Light of Dawn. So if you don't know how the 2-set works, after a Word of Glory, the next Light of Dawn you use is going to be replicated, so it's going to go up, it's going to happen twice. This means that you will also get 10 stacks of the Light of the Martyr conduit, and therefore your next Light of the Martyr will be much fatter. Now I didn't mention this conduit, but I am gonna be showing right now on the screen. This is what the Soulvine tree for rating is gonna be looking like, and as you can see, we are running with the MARAADS conduit that is untempered dedication abilities. That's just gonna make it so that we are just gonna do more healing with Light of the Martyr. Now I can't stress enough how important it is to get down the groove of generating the holy power and then spending it on these Lights of Dawn and then consuming the Light of the Martyr buff. So that's something that you should be keeping track of. Very importantly, you don't want to be wasting any of these buffs of having casted a Light of the Martyr, or rather any MARAADS buffs. So 100% keep that somewhere tracked. Once we're done with MARAADS being explained, the most important thing coming up is, well, how do you get to casting a lot of Lights of Dawn? How does it happen that I have less Lights of Dawn casted? Well, this is just going to be a matter of how much holy power can you generate. So if you go to any log on Warcraft logs, and then you go to your casts, there's like going to be a tab where you can see the casts you do. It's going to show you your casts per minute of every single spell. So you can then compare if you're like falling behind on using certain spells. So as a general rule, just going through the basics of a rotation for a Holy Paladin, you always want to be keeping Holy Shock on cooldown, so always be using it either for healing or for DPS, doesn't matter, but always keep it on cooldown. Next up, if you have Wings up, that means that you can use Hammer of Wrath, so you should keep Hammer of Wrath on cooldown. And then after Hammer of Wrath comes Crusader Strike. Why Crusader Strike after Hammer of Wrath? Well, both of them just do the same thing. They do damage and they generate one holy power, and Hammer of Wrath just happens to do more damage than Crusader Strike, so it's always going to have prio. you don't really want to be waiting on a Hammer of Wrath because you're not going to be running with Vanguard's Momentum. That is the Mythic plus Legendary, so you will always have one charge of Hammer of Wrath. There's no reason not to use it immediately. So yeah, next, after Hammer of Wrath, you will want to be consuming your Crusader Strike charges, always trying not to let them cap up at 2 stacks. You want to always keep them rolling. It's fine keeping 1 stack rolling and doing something else in the meantime, but if you're capping on your Crusader Strike stacks, then you're missing out on possible Holy Power generation, excuse me. Now, while you're generating all this Holy Power, you will have to get rid of it. So how do you get rid of it? You always want to be pressing Light of Dawn. Always. Unless you are trying to actually consume one of the buffs from Vanquisher's Hammer. So I didn't talk about this, but we're always playing Necrolord. I'm not going to talk about Kyrian or Benthir or whatever. I'm only talking about Necrolord here. Necrolord is the Covenant that's for the most part doing the biggest HPS. However, Kyrian is competitive as well as Benthir in some scenarios, but I'm just going to be talking about Necro because that's what I'm playing and for the most part has the biggest potential for huge HPS, provided that you don't get sniped. So you will be playing Necro in this case, we're talking about it, and you will just be using your Vanquisher's Hammers whenever you see fit. There's no rule for it. Some people say you should always keep 1 charge on cooldown. I don't believe in that. You should just try and maximize the value of consuming the charges based on whenever you need to do a lot of healing. So you should save up charges whenever you see big damage incoming. And there's no mystery about it. You throw the hammer, it does some damage, you get a buff, you track this buff. It's important to track this buff. You don't want to let it expire. And you can also do some shenanigans like extending the buffs. You can, if you're going to be dropping and you have like 1 stack remaining and you don't want to be dropping it, you can throw another hammer and get it up all the way to 3 stacks. So that's something that you should always use a weak card to track or something like that. And then it's just so simple. You just go ahead and use a Word of Glory onto somebody, just like if you were doing some spot healing with a Light of the Martyr. That will cause a Light of Dawn to happen, and then you go ahead and do a Light of the Martyr right after. So it's really important to think about using Words of Glory when consuming Vanquisher Hammer charges as if you were actually using a Light of Dawn, and therefore whenever you consume a charge of Vanquisher's Hammer, your next move should always be to use a Light of the Martyr. That way you don't waste that buff. A lot of people, I believe, will just override it because they might just get a proc of Divine Purpose, and then they go ahead and override one buff of MARAADS. So what are the talents we're gonna be playing with? I might as well put them on the screen right now. These are the talents we're playing with. There's not really changing much here, unless you're talking about playing a fight like Halandrus, where you would also switch away from MARAADS onto Shadow Breakers, but that's a different story. That's just a case-by-case scenario. As a general rule, you're always going to be running with these. Double Beacon is also kind of switchable for Beacon of Virtue. However, Beacon of Virtue kind of requires a little bit more skill with timing. It's also much more mana consuming. So I would recommend for any person that just wants to play it safe or is kind of a beginner and doesn't want to bother with the timings. It's not like Beacon of Virtue is far ahead or anything. It's just kind of more convenient, or you're probably able to squish in more healing if you're really kind of playing with a certain comp or a certain fight. For the most part, Double Beacon is kind of the strongest option anyways, and it's just the easiest one as well. So you play with Double Beacon, you play with Awakening, and you play with Divine Purpose, and it's just a slot machine of the more Holy Power you generate, the more procs you're going to be getting from Awakening, from Divine Purpose, and that's just all going to be fitting into your Wings uptime from your 4-set. And all in all just boils in together into this mess that is Holy Paladin. You generate a lot of Holy Power. The more efficient you are at generating the Holy Power and spending it at the same time without wasting any resources or any potential Holy Power generation, the more healing you will be doing. So that's all in all a very condensed, or rather, I don't know, maybe I went in a bit too generalistic still, but I would definitely recommend you checking out some of my gameplay videos. If you have any questions, also drop them in the comments. So what did you do about Judgment? What did you do about Consecration? You want to be doing some Judgments whenever possible, fit them in the rotation. Judgment will proc Judgment of Light, which will mean a lot of healing. However, it does not generate any Holy Power, and we never want to use something in detriment of a Holy Power generating ability. So yeah, Judgment comes afterwards of any other of the spells we already talked about. It should be like the 4th most important spell, and then Consecration, you kind of never really use it on raiding unless you just want to go for damage. And there's also going to be the question of what do you do about Flash of Light and Holy Light. The reality is you don't really want to be using these unless something really bad is happening. Even if you are at range, you probably are just better off moving. However, if you're in a situation where you can't really get a melee for whatever reason, going for a Flash of Light or a Holy Light and try and generate 1 Holy Power from consuming an Infusion of Light proc with a Holy Light could be a thing. However, don't really need to stress it too much. That is probably a very situational thing to do, and you should just find a situation where your brain just is comfortable with that decision. But for the most part, that should not be the go-to whatsoever. Consider Flash of Light and Holy Light as if they didn't exist for the most part, and just work on the base rotation of the most important spells we already talked about. Also, you just want to be using Aura Mastery with Devotion Aura whenever your raid is assigning it to. If you're not getting that assigned, just use it whenever you know there's going to be a lot of damage happening. Use it, of course, before the damage happens. Don't stress it too much. It's not a healing cooldown, so it's not going to show on your HPS. But if you want to kill the boss, you should just try to use it to the best of your abilities. As normal in a raiding environment, that should be assigned, but if it's not, just use it whenever you see fit. A quick side note, if you're really just focused on raid healing and you do not really care about Mythic Plus as a Holy Paladin, then you should be trying to buy the Shadow Orb of Torment with your dinars from those vendors after doing the boss kills on the Fated Raids quest. Or you could just drop it from Remnant of Nurse Soul. This trinket is a 2-minute cooldown trinket. You use it and you take some damage, you stand still casting it for a couple seconds, and then you get a massive amount of mastery. The reason why it's so good, it's because of this massive amount of mastery we get. We should just be trying to keep this on cooldown as much as possible, but also trying to use it before any big amount of damage is happening, as well as trying to have wings ready for that scenario. So it's just a matter of putting all these things together whenever there's going to be a lot of damage happening, and then with the trinket and all, you will just do a lot more healing. Now, the second trinket you should be trying to get is the trinket from Tobra. This comes from Grimroad Depot, so if you get that at 304 item level, that should be unreplaceable. That is the second best healer trinket for for Holy Paladins for raiding in general. However, if you are not able to get this from the Bolt at 304, a Cavalist Ibnel at 311 will be better, so you could also just get that for a lot of critical strike, which also means a lot of healing. So yeah, you could get those trinkets if you're really just interested and focused on raid healing as a Holy Paladin and you don't care at all about Mythic Plus. And really quick side note as well, you want to be crafting Unity onto your bracers. That way you're taking up a slot that's also has a socket but also doesn't have the biggest amount of intellect, so you want to have your low item level piece onto a shittier slot like it's the bracers. MARAADS will have to go onto the chest because you want to be using the Mechagon rings onto your ring slots, and those Mechagon rings you want to be using are the one for whenever you hit an enemy from the back and the one that gives you a bunch of haste. That should be your gear options. The rest, just get a 4-set, just get as much item level as you can and try and get as much haste and mastery as you can, but otherwise it's kind of free for all. Don't worry too much, just get a bunch of item level. For any other gearing questions, you should always go ahead and check out questionableepic.com. There's a section where you can see what your upgrades are or compare items that you already have to see what's the best that you have in your bags. However, the best option is probably always going to be to go to the Paladin Discord and ask out in the Holy Questions section what your question is going to be, and somebody will have that will have a lot of experience will show and just answer your question to the best of their abilities. That's the easiest and quickest way of getting somebody to tell you what you should be picking or just itemizing as. And yeah, go ahead and do that. If you guys want to get any of my weak auras, you like my UI and want to get any of the elements you see there, you can go ahead and join my Discord. You can do so by looking at the description of this video, and there will be a lot of links in my Discord where you can get every single one of my weak auras, as well as any macros or any of my profiles for details, for plater, for LVI, for grid. That's my healing raid frames. So anything that you might like out of my UI, you can go ahead and find it on my Discord. So for stats, you should go for haste first and then mastery. However, intellect is king, so whenever you can get an item level upgrade, you should go for it. All our stats are extremely good, however, haste is just a little bit better. Well, not just a little bit, it's way better, because the more haste, the more things we can do in less time. So we got a shorter global cooldown as well as less cooldown on things like Holy Shock, meaning we can generate more holy power per minute or whatever your metric is going to be, and that just means more healing for a Holy Paladin. That also means you go kind of quicker, but Holy Paladin is fine around the 30 to 35 sort of haste percentage mark. That is completely fine. And then you want to get some mastery as well as some burst. Mastery will do more healing the closer you are to our allies. However, burst in fights like Calandros will pull ahead. It's not too big of a difference, doesn't really matter too much. If you're gonna go for burst for Mythic Plus, you might as well kind of just switch away between mastery and burst a little bit, but not stress it too much. It's kind of whatever. Crit is also pretty good, but it should kind of be like our lowest prio. Now, let's just get the elephant out of the room. Holy Paladins don't do a lot of healing. It is just how it is. Kind of probably a little bit late to get the elephant out of the room now, but yeah, you get it. Holy Paladins don't do much healing. It's just because we are not able to just naturally pump out as much. We don't have the potential to do that much healing. Even if we were under healing a fight, there is no way we could ever reach the numbers of other healers. It's just by nature based on the tuning we have right now. There is also the downside of Holy Paladins just being very bad at sniping healing, especially raid Y AoE healing. We don't have anything that compares to, I don't know, a ramp from a Resto Druid, a revival, just a massive amount of constant ticking healing from Essence Font spams. We don't have anything like that, so our only tool is to constantly try and generate some stable healing with Lights of Dawn and feed in with the spot healing with the fight on Lights of the Martyr. That is the place of a Holy Paladin right now. It's usually always been this place. Sometimes we had more raid healing based on maybe being Benthir, but for the most part, Holy Paladin has always filled the role of an in-between, just pick up the remaining bits of healing and fill them in with spot healing, also providing other stuff like utility and raid-wide damage reduction with Aura Mastery and Devo. But yeah, us Holy Paladins are relegated to this spot where we are not really able to pop off. Now, however, you can do a lot of healing still, but if you're gonna go and compare in Warcraft logs or any other much more, ranking metrics, you will be seeing Holy Paladin down bad, because if you are playing in a comp with a lot of other raid healers, you will be kind of unable to keep up with them. If they're just sniping everything from you, you just gotta be better than them, really. That's all there is. If your HPS sucks, just think about what you're doing. Look at your overhealing. If you're overhealing by 60 to 70% of what you're doing, then you're just getting sniped. If you're just not pulling up the numbers, maybe you're just lacking some holy power generation. But after all, what really matters is that nobody is dying. And if you are able to keep up the raid and people don't die and the boss dies, that is your job well done. So don't get discouraged by low numbers. Just try and focus on what you're doing. Try and focus on your rotation. Compare yourselves to others by looking at logs. See what your holy power generation per minute is. See the stuff like WoW Analyzer kind of helps with this. It might be a little bit broken nowadays. It's not really accurate to use WoW Analyzer with, I think MARAADS is kind of breaking it, but still, you should probably use this tool to your advantage for things like average amount of targets hit by Light of Dawn. That's something you can check out. It's usually almost always 5, but if you're kind of failing at that, maybe you could go ahead and check that there if you're fearing that that might be a possibility. But also just check the amount of holy power you waste, that you can also check in Warcraft logs. That is usually the metrics that show that something is going extremely wrong. Holy power generation per minute, or just simply casts per minute on the key elements of the rotation, wasting holy power, and in the case of MARAADS, not using all the procs of MARAADS that you can get. So I'm gonna close it here, guys. The guide is already kind of long already. So if you got any questions, drop them in the comments. Please sub to the channel. Really appreciate that. And yeah, anything you want to know, go ahead and follow my stream or just sub to the channel, and I'll also be streaming on YouTube sometimes. And check out my other videos where I show some gameplay. I have a little add-on down there on the bottom left side, right up above my HP. So you can see my HP bar, and just above it, there should be a timer of all the things that I'm doing. So you should see all the spells that I'm using in a sequence. It's kind of annoying to look at because things just go so quick, but that's a way of seeing where you maybe have a question of what did you do here. I'm also gonna drop down in the description a link to a webpage that I find that might be really helpful for people that are really just trying to improve, already are kind of comfortable with the spec, and they're just really trying to push up a little bit higher. This website will be pretty helpful in looking at what other players are doing based on the top logs. You can see the timelines of what they're used for the different fights, the different covenants, whatever, when they use in cooldowns. Might as well answer this quickly. When do you use cooldowns as a Holy Paladin? Always. You always use wings whenever they're up, unless there's something like really special that you need to wait for, which will just be a matter of common sense on a 5x5 basis. But the nature of the 4 set for Holy Paladins is just that, yeah, you use the Light of Dawn, you generate more wings, therefore you should use wings as often as possible so you can keep on abusing the 4 set. I didn't touch too much on the 4 set because I don't think it's that meaningful to explain. You just want to be using a lot of Lights of Dawn. That's what I already really stressed out. So yeah, the more Lights of Dawn, the more 4 set procs you will get, the more wings uptime, the more healing you do with all of that, and that way, or therefore, you want to be using wings as often as possible, because that way you will be able to get more stuff from the 4 set. It all kind of just boils down on this thing that I already talked about before, that the more wings, the more healing. So yeah, that's it for me, guys. Again, hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video.